The purpose of this video is not to dissuade you from pursuing your big content creator or influencer dreams. The purpose of this video is to make sure that you are educated on the risks inherent with growing an audience, because there are risks. If you are going to be pursuing internet fame, you need to understand those risks and those downsides so that you can make a more informed decision for yourself, for your career, for your future, and for your family. So, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get started, though, allow me to introduce myself really quick. My name is Laura, and here on my channel, I talk all things health, wealth, and happiness here in the attention economy. I am a grad student earning my master's in counseling with a specific emphasis on career counseling because my goal is to work with people like you and me who are working on building careers that use our creativity. And in today's economy, if you want to be a professional creative, having some sort of audience is kind of a non-negotiable. We, I think, are really well aware of the benefits of having an audience. It opens up many, many doors, many, many opportunities. But for as many upsides as there are to having an audience, there are equal number of downsides. This video, this whole channel is for people who are interested in building an audience, but maybe feel a little bit ambivalent to it, or maybe struggling with getting out of your own way to build an audience because you know that there is this sort of like social discourse about how much influencers suck, how much famous people deserve bad things because they're famous. When you read that in comment sections, when you hear people say that, of course it's going to stop you from wanting to pursue that, even if you are interested in the benefits that an audience would bring you. So, we are going to be talking about more of those risks that come with being an online creator. But I am also going to be hopefully able to leave you with some hope, with some tips for protecting your mental health as you embark on this journey. Without further ado, let's talk about the science. So, there's not a lot of scientific literature out there about social media influencers specifically, but there is plenty of science out there about the use of social media from the perspective of a consumer, as well as fame in general, becoming a celebrity in general. Most of the science that talks about fame looks at traditional celebrity formats, so like actors and musicians. And with the social media stuff, most of that comes from the perspective of users of social media. But we can sort of extrapolate from both of those things to make some conclusions about the risks of becoming a social media influencer. And then we can also look at the very limited literature that there is on social media influencers specifically. I think we all understand that being online is generally associated with negative mental health outcomes. When you're spending a lot of time online, you are putting yourself in the position of engaging in a lot of social comparison with others. You may start to feel worse about your body, your appearance, your finances, your like how interesting your life is when you are constantly spending a lot of time on your rectangle watching people be beautiful, be skinny, be having fun that you're not having. When that kind of content is taking up the majority of your feed, you start to believe that that is the norm, that like most people are rich enough to afford mansions and Lambos and constantly doing clothing and makeup hauls and things like that. And that's simply not true. But when that's all you're seeing and you start to believe that, of course, you are going to compare yourself negatively and assume that you are worse off than most people. There's that piece. Then we have also the aspect of social media algorithms being designed to be really emotionally activating. Emotionally activating content keeps you on their platforms longer, which allows these platforms to sell you more stuff. The longer that you're on Instagram, the longer that you're on Facebook, the longer that you're on YouTube, the more opportunities these platforms have to show you ads. And the more ads you see, the more likely you are to spend your money on whatever those ads are showing you. It's very transparent when you start to see it for what it is. From a consumer standpoint, most data is going to tell you that social media use, especially excessive social media use, is bad for your mental health because it has you sitting in those unpleasant emotions of like anger and feeling like you don't measure up and hopelessness for humanity in the future more than pleasant emotions like hope and competency and feeling good about yourself, self-esteem. But what about for influencers? Influencers or content creators, their job has them online more than the average person, most likely. If we know that being on these apps for an extended period of time erodes your mental health, and you are opting into a job that has you spending a lot of time on social media, it stands to reason that that alone would be a big risk to your mental health. Now, it is worth noting that science does not agree that all social media use is bad for you. In fact, there are plenty of studies that show that some social media use, when used wisely, can be protective to your mental health. Let's say you're a kid in, rural middle America and you're gay, and nobody in your real life is gay, and in fact everybody in your real life is homophobic. If you're able to find an accepting community online, which you will be able to, that will be protective for your mental health. So not all social media use is bad, but using social media mindlessly is generally going to be bad for you, according to the science. The research on fame in general shows that fame is, in general, bad for your mental health. Think about all of the former child celebrities who crashed out and, went through a phase where they shaved their heads or wound up in jail or like were just really unruly and were constantly in the news for bad behavior, drunk driving, being disorderly in public. These are not behaviors that mentally well people engage in. Obviously, you don't need to be a celebrity to go through a rebellious teen, rebellious young adult phase, but I mean, just think about the sheer number of celebrities who have died from overdoses, who have committed suicide, who have left the spotlight after gaining fame and gaining success. Our brains were not designed to have millions of people watch us and watch our every move and scrutinize and criticize everything that we do. Addiction is a coping mechanism. Suicide is a coping mechanism. Leaving the spotlight is obviously a way to escape the negatives of the spotlight. Isolation and loneliness are big risks to gaining fame in general. We all went through the pandemic. We all experienced that isolation and loneliness, and we have all seen what that does to ourselves, but also like to society. There's, on the one hand, this isolation and loneliness aspect, but then on the other hand, there's also a loss of privacy, a loss of autonomy, a level of scrutiny that you have to balance, right? And I think like both the loneliness factor and the loss of privacy factor are in and of themselves problems. I think there's also a certain level of this tension between these two things that like if you've lost privacy, it means that more people are paying attention to you and therefore like you shouldn't feel lonely, which can create another layer of distress. This is not a comprehensive look of all of the risks of fame, but just to like paint a picture of like what the current scientific literature says about excessive use of the internet and also becoming famous. Both of these things, broad strokes, not great for your mental health. So, with that background out of the way, let's take a look at what the science says about becoming a social media influencer specifically. As of today, as of posting this video, I have only been able to find 3 peer-reviewed scientific articles that talk about social media influencers and internet content creators specifically and their mental health. And none of these studies are based on influencers and content creators who are in North America. So that's really, really important to keep in mind as we talk about this. The first paper that I found is a meta-analysis that was attempting to look at existing papers about social media influencers to ascertain like overarching themes, overarching findings. And their finding was that there is nothing out there. That at the time that they published this meta-analysis, there was exactly one article that looked specifically at social media influencers. And they did discuss that, and we're going to talk about that article next. But because there was nothing that was looking at social media influencers, they extrapolated some findings about the mental health of self-employed folks. They found that there's no significant difference in mental health outcomes between traditionally employed people and self-employed people overall, but demographic factors such as race and gender can change that. So, for example, one study found that being self-employed was associated with depression in women, but not men. But on the other hand, there is evidence that being self-employed is protective for older people, but not for younger workers. This paper did note that this finding is important because most social media influencers are young and female, but it's also worth noting that this finding is correlational. So we don't know if it's being self-employed that produces depression in women and produces mental health struggles in younger people, or if young people and women who are more susceptible to depression are therefore more likely to pursue self-employment because they feel like they can't sustain traditional employment. You see what I'm saying? Like, we don't know which direction it goes, but it is still worth noting that self-employment is associated with worse mental health outcomes in women and in young people. So that's study number one, the meta-analysis attempting to look at what science says about social media influencers. Now let's look at the one article that study found, which was a year-long investigation launched by the UK Parliament. Again, noting that this is looking specifically at influencer culture in Britain. Oh, and the last one, the meta-analysis, was also conducted by people who are based in the UK. This was actually a really big investigation that they launched. It was published in 2022, and they did it in 2021. They looked at not just influencers. In fact, like, influencers themselves were a pretty small part of their investigation, but they also talked to people at various social media platforms like Meta and YouTube and TikTok. They looked into laws that pertained to social media and the influencer occupation. They surveyed children who use social media. All in all, their findings were pretty abysmal. They found that there are many, many, many occupational challenges that influencers face, including pressure to work around the clock. The nature of these algorithms produces this pressure to be constantly posting, constantly creating so that you have something to post, which then turns into burnout. We have issues with inconsistent pay, wildly inconsistent pay, issues with cyberbullying, harassment, doxing, stalking. These are threats not just to your psychological health, but your physical well-being, right? We've all heard stories of famous internet people having individuals show up at their house. That's not okay. That is a huge risk that doesn't come with most other occupations. I think that a huge criticism that people have to influencers and celebrities in general talking about the challenges of fame, they're like, oh my God, shut up. You have it so easy. Like, you make so much money. What are you even talking about? Like, your job isn't harder than mine. Like, I'm a construction worker. Don't come at me and tell me that your job is harder. Okay, you're a construction worker. Are people showing up at your house wanting to take pictures of you? Are people sending SWAT teams to your house just because you are you doing your job? Probably not. Yes, being a construction worker is dangerous and hard work. And there are dangers involved with becoming famous as well, legitimate dangers to your physical safety. Discrimination is also a huge issue. Algorithms themselves can be very discriminatory. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, where like you as a consumer, if you're scrolling mindlessly and you notice that all of the people on your algorithms are beautiful, why do you think that is? Why isn't the algorithm showing you more normal looking people? How many people on your feed are people of color or queer or whatever? If a large number of the people on your algorithm are queer or people of color or other like marginalized groups, it's probably because you have taught your algorithm to show you people like that. We've seen the leaked policies from platforms like TikTok that explicitly say to like push pretty people out, that they are suppressing ugly people or normal looking people in favor of pretty people. These algorithms, yes, are discriminatory, but it's because people are discriminatory. Audiences are discriminatory. But the fact remains that if you are a person of color, if you are a woman, if you are gender nonconforming, if you're a queer person, and you are a marginalized person in society in general, you're going to be marginalized by the algorithms as well, which is going to lead to inequities in pay. There's no legal protections for people who are pursuing careers online that exist for pretty much every other occupation, including traditional celebrities. Creators can often face issues with copyright infringement. And while I like to think that there's progress being made on this front, especially like here on YouTube, the fact of the matter is content creators get their shit ripped off all the time. And while technically there is supposed to be a pathway to remedy that, oftentimes they find that it is not sufficient. If for no other reason, it can be impossible to keep up with people stealing their content, bots stealing and reposting their content. Content creators report that appealing decisions made by these platforms can be difficult and time consuming. Then we have the issue of underage influencers. Now, I assume that you, the person who is watching this video, you are probably not underage, but we need to talk about it anyway. Kids who are in traditional media are protected by the California Child Actors Law, aka the Goguin Law, which requires like studios to set aside 15% of the child's earnings into a trust that cannot be accessed by the child's family and can only be accessed by the child when they turn 18. So it guarantees that the child will at least have 15% of their earnings left when they turn 18. I was shocked to learn that it's only 15% that the child can count on having when they turn 18. The Goguin Law also establishes rules around education, work hours, time off. Child labor laws are being eroded fast in this country, but as for right now, at least, child actors have a decent amount of protections. There are no equivalent laws for kids online. Absolutely zero protections whatsoever when we're talking about kids who are online and their parents are managing them. I do feel hope because like this is becoming a greater and greater conversation topic, greater and greater issue that's being looked at. But as for right now, there's nothing that protects kids. And, you know, there's nothing that protects content creators either, really. Going back to traditional media, there are unions. We have SAG-AFTRA, right? Like there are unions that protect talent in Hollywood. There are no influencer unions. None. There are no unions for influencers or content creators, despite the fact that these platforms would not exist without us, the people who are putting content on their platforms. All of this to say that the findings of the UK Parliament are that like you can expect all of the worst parts of like traditional fame and all of the worst parts of like self-employment, you know. All of the negative things are risks when you are pursuing a career online. So let's go to the last peer-reviewed paper that I want to talk about, which is the one and only peer-reviewed scientific study that is looking specifically at the mental health of social media influencers. The one and only, okay? This was published at the end of 2024. It's very recent. And it was looking at social media influencers who are primarily based in the United Arab Emirates. So again, we have no data on influencers and content creators based in the United States, Canada, or anywhere else in the world. Their study found a correlation between higher social media usage and worse mood that is corroborated by existing evidence. They showed that influencers with higher follower counts experienced worse mood. So the higher your subscriber count, the higher your follower count, the worse your mood will be. They found an association between reporting higher income from their social media platform and worse mood, and an association between higher income made online and worse relationship outcomes. These are correlational findings. We don't know if it's that, higher follower counts lead to worse mood, or if having worse mood leads to higher follower counts. But I think logically it makes sense that it's probably that more followers equals worse mood. But the science does not show that. It doesn't show causation, it only shows correlation. And again, it is also worth noting that this study has taken place primarily on social media influencers who are located in the Middle East, not in North America. But I think it is not looking good. Let me go back to the beginning of this video where I said that the purpose of this video is not to scare you off from your big social media dreams. If you are here, if you're still with me, you may be reconsidering. That's understandable. I mean, again, like my purpose of this video is to present you with the data so that you have more information to make a more informed decision for yourself, for your career, and for your family, so that you can have a more fleshed out understanding of, like, is this the right path for me? Yes, there are many, many, many benefits to having an online following, especially if you're a creative and you're trying to make money from your creativity. But there are many, many, many drawbacks as well. Are the positives worth the negatives to you? Only you can decide that. But let me offer some ways to hopefully mitigate these drawbacks. The first one is having a plan in place for maintaining good boundaries with your screen time, right? I think, like, if you are working on building an audience, the time is now before you have a huge audience to start practicing having really, really good boundaries with your screen time, making sure that you are not constantly scrolling, setting work hours for yourself and sticking to them and saying, you know what, I am not looking at or responding to comments after 5 p.m. 5 p.m., I'm putting the phone away. 5 p.m., I'm off the clock, right? So that's number one. Number two is, probably have a therapist or somebody that you can talk to about the challenges, the scrutiny, the criticism that will come your way as you start to build an audience, as you continue to grow your audience. Have somebody on your side who can listen, who can validate, who can remind you that you're not a horrible, horrible person. Number three suggestion is maybe take the time to put a plan in place for the inevitability of getting canceled, or the inevitability, at least, of getting criticism. I struggle with anxiety a lot. I have OCD. And so I have found that the only way to get my anxiety brain to shut up is to answer its questions. So thinking about, like, okay, what if I get canceled? Okay, yeah, what if I get canceled? What will I do? How will I handle it? Who will I go to for support? You may have to think of, like, a few scenarios, because you may get canceled for something you did do and that you stand by. How will you defend yourself? Will you stand up to the bullies and say, hey, I know you don't like this thing that I did and I'm not sorry? Let's say you get canceled because of something that you did and you realize that your critics are right, that you did mess up? How will you handle that? Like, can you start practicing your apology now? Let's say you get canceled for something that you didn't do. How will you stand up for yourself? Or will you just not address it, right? Like, thinking through those worst case scenarios, I think, are a really good idea to do before you have gained a huge following, because it can help lower that anxiety to know that you have a plan in place. A fourth thing that you can do is to like think about your values with your platform. What are your non-negotiables? What is your top priority in terms of the relationship that you're trying to build with your audience? Having those values in place will help you make decisions as you gain that fame, as you gain an audience, as you have more and more people wanting something from you, more and more people who are offering you opportunities. Having a really, really clear sort of code of ethics, values set that you can come back to help you make those decisions will help you get out of the drama of like, is this opportunity right for me? Should I pursue this opportunity to get sponsored by this company that I don't agree with, but they're going to pay me a lot of money right now and I need that money? And then I think the last thing that you can do to support yourself is to ask yourself if there are other ways to achieve your goals that don't involve fame. If you are a creative person and you want to be able to monetize your creativity, are there other ways for you to monetize your creativity that don't involve being online? Can you reach your financial goals? Let's say you're a jewelry maker. Can you reach your financial goals by simply networking in real life? Can you reach your financial goals by simply going to craft fairs and selling your stuff there? Can you reach your financial goals by having a day job that's good enough and pursuing your art on the side? I am going to make another video at some point in the future to help you figure out if you should try to make money through your art or not, because I don't think that it's a good idea for everybody to try to monetize your art. It doesn't always make sense for everybody, depending on what you want to get out of your art, your personal priorities with your art. So I'm going to make a video about that at some point in the future. This video ended up being a little bit more scattered than what I had hoped it would be, but I hope that it has been helpful. I hope that you are leaving this video with more clarity as for whether or not creating an audience is the right path for you, whether or not the trade-offs, the risks are worth it for you. And let me know if you want more videos in the future in terms of more strategies to protect your mental health as you create fame, as you create an audience, as you work on your big dreams of being an influencer or internet content creator. Because I really do think that you don't have to be doomed to these negative mental health things. There are plenty of things that you can do to support your mental health as you create fame, but you need to be really intentional about it and you need to be practicing it before you're famous, frankly. So let me know if you want me to make more videos on that. This is what I am interested in professionally, creatively. My mission is to support you in your big dreams, your big creative dreams. So let me know how I can do that for you. How can I support you? What would be useful for me to make a video on in the future? Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Wednesday. I hope you are having a great week, and I will talk to you later. I'll be back on Sunday to go over my channel analytics because I am you. I'm trying to build an audience here on the big wide internet. So if you want to follow along with my journey of getting to monetization with my platform, hit subscribe and come back on Sunday for my weekly update. So I'll talk to you then. Have a good week. Bye.